Accessing Secure Channel. The Agent Files, where aspiring agents rise and masters flourish. Powered by Agent Builder Coaching. Mission initiated. File loading.
Hi there, this is Peter Fan for Agent Builder Coaching, and today in our continuing discussions about preparing for a career in real estate, whether that is before you've started the course or after you've started the real estate course and you're just about to get licensed. This part, these next 7 episodes, apply wherever you are in your business decisions around real estate. And we call them the 7 essentials to success in real estate sales. We did an overview video as part of the aspiring agent section, and we'll also do an overview section specific to those that are already in the course and are getting ready to either have written their exam or are getting ready to write their exam. But we're also going to dive into each of the individual sections because it is an important part of basically the essence of what business is all about. Not specifically to real estate, but to all businesses, right? It doesn't matter whether you're a plumber or, a shoemaker or, an engineer, a doctor, an accountant, or a real estate agent. Business requires a certain number of essential activities that have to take place no matter what. Your expertise in real estate is just one factor of that, and the rest we need to at least address in some concerted effort to make sure that we're all on the same page. We call them the 7 essentials. Mr. Gerber wrote a book many years ago, the E-Myth, and that kind of was the originator of some of these relatively straightforward principles. We adopted them specifically for real estate, and I think our adaptation for your adventure in real estate, your business development in real estate, is really key to kind of get a clear understanding that all of the pieces do fit together, but individually they are equally important also to recognize that not all of it has to be your job, right? A lot of this can be delegated at some point in time or another. And in fact, I want you to think about it in that context, is that how can you make any of these pieces, become part of a total while still, being able to either separate it and delegate it to other people. About the only part that really is yours, absolutely 100% yours, are the big why, the section that we're going to talk about today, and the superpower. The superpower is really about, what makes you unique, what makes you special. And if you can somehow connect that to your real estate profession, then obviously you have a unique, memorable business profile that will make you stand out. The big why is really about, why are you doing this? It's a question that I ask every single agent that I've ever talked to, and it's literally thousands. And the answers are remarkable. And in many cases, in fact, the answer is quite surprising to me because many people haven't actually thought of it. Right? Why are you going to real estate? Well, for the money. Well, yeah, but why? Why real estate? I mean, there's insurance, there's financial planning, there's the stock market, there's mortgage brokers, there's you name it. There's many, many other semi-self-employed licensed environments in which you are reasonably free to do whatever it is that you want to do and however you want to do it. Why real estate? And you get the typical answers of, well, I like houses and I like real estate. But, it doesn't actually answer the question. Right? Why real estate in particular? Because what a lot of people don't realize is that real estate sales has actually very little to do with real estate. That sounds maybe a bit surprising for some, but it's really about people's transitions through lives. Very few buyers, very few sellers actually buy, sell real estate for that sake of buying and selling. There's typically something fairly dramatic, very exciting sometimes, but sometimes very sad, taking place in their life that forces them or requires them to make a move. And we help them through that transition. Now, the reasons why they are moving, we don't always get to tackle, although sometimes we do, right? Sometimes we are becoming kind of the counselor, the consultant, I don't want to give it the license name as far as a psychologist or psychiatrist. We don't never go quite that far, or legal advisor or financial advisor, because we're not licensed to do that. But we're certainly an advisor of sorts, and oftentimes, in fact, one of our preferred roles, I think, is to be the catalyst to all the solutions. If you become kind of the go-to person that your clients trust enough to say, hey, who would you, where would I, how would I, if you get those types of questions from your clients, you know you've received basically special access to the inner sanctum of where people are at in their life and their being, and it's a preferred position. And anybody that has a preferred position in a relationship, obviously, has gained the trust of the people that you're dealing with, and that's a wonderful position to be. And that in its own right can be a big why, by the way, right? That you want to be that sometimes solution to the problem, right? That very much can be a motivator, of course. Okay, but let's talk about the big why in the context of how we see it in real estate. And so again, I'll ask you, and I'm going to challenge you on this, that in the exercises that we're going to go through, is to keep asking you the question: why am I doing it? Why am I in real estate? What is so important to me about this that I want to pay the price? That I want to do this? That I want to deal with the rejection, with the challenges, with sometimes the disappointment, right? So, what motivates you? Why are you motivated, right, to be in real estate? So, defining your own personal and business reasons for why becomes an exercise that you want to spend some time on. You want to be clear on this, because there are going to be times that you desperately need to be reminded of those motivators, right? Because something crazy will happen, something disappointing, something emotional will happen that will possibly take you away from that focus, that drive that you had. And you've heard me had various stories about what motivates people, and then I'll tell you one or two more as we go along through this exercise. But it's really for you to kind of thinking about, what do you want your business, your life, your presence on earth to be like once you have accomplished it, right? And then once you can envision it, once you can articulate it, to describe it, even paint it, to draw it, to take a photograph of it, once you can do that, then reverse engineering the steps to get there actually becomes a relatively straightforward exercise. And that doesn't mean that it makes it easy to accomplish. No, but it makes it so much easier to then connect the dots between, your vision, your passion, your mission in life, and the tasks and the activities and the roles that you need to play, that you need to act upon, the expertise that you need to have, in order to accomplish all of these objectives, all of these goals. The long-term ones, as in life goals and life objectives, but also the shorter terms, intermediate goals and objectives. So that's why it's important, and it really becomes your roadmap. And keep in mind, one of the things that a lot of people don't really come to grips with until they're actually in the business is that to a degree you are 100% independent. right? There is nobody that's going to tell you got to do. You have to show up. There's people that will try to motivate you to do things, but ultimately it's your decision, right? Nobody's going to force you to do anything in this business, which makes it optional, and therefore there's a good number of people that's not encouragement enough. You actually need a little bit of that guidance, that hand holding, that push, that nudge, right? And it's having then those big goals, those big objectives, those big dreams dissected into action items for each and every day, each and every week, each and every month, with targets and objectives attached to it, makes it easier to follow the roadmap, right? And in order to follow that roadmap, start taking the actions and accomplishing things. So that's why all of this stuff is pretty important. Okay. Now, it also drives resilience, of course, right? Because if you know where you're going, if you know what the steps are, if you know what the pieces are that drive you towards your big dreams, sometimes disappointment can be a bit easier to overcome because you're not taking it as serious. Let me. I've told a few stories around some people that had really big goals, but there's one that always sticks to mind, and it's this lady realtor in Chicago that attended a conference, and she actually was struggling a bit in her career, in her first couple of years in real estate, and she wasn't living in operating, doing business in the most affluent area of Chicago, so she was having a tough time, and the market was having a tough time once she started. And as she was telling the story on stage, and it keeps this in mind, there's a stage of, quite a large stage at a large real estate convention. There's literally thousands of people in the auditorium. And they're all listening to this rather unimposing lady sitting on a chair telling her story, 20, 25 years after it happened, right? So she is actually very good at doing these presentations by now. But she's telling this quite compelling story that, early in her career, she went over to a corner store to get some groceries. And as she's walking towards the grocery store, there's a young boy that she knows runs out of the store with a loaf of bread under his arm, and the shopkeeper screaming and yelling behind her in the store after this boy, and boy takes off and disappears. And she goes and does these groceries, and the shop owner says, "Well, did you see the boy that just took off? He stole some stuff." And the lady said, "Well, I'm sorry to hear that, yada, yada, yada." Anyway, she decided to pay for whatever it is that the shopkeeper said that the boy stole. And they said, "Well, I think I know him, but I'll talk to his mom," and yada, yada, yada. Anyway, so long story short, she did talk to the boy because, she figured that, hey, the boy had stolen this bread because there was no food in the house. And there was no food in the house. And she knew where the boy lived, and realized that mom was, not doing so well, and hadn't made any money for a few days. And so there was literally no food in the house. So the boy did what he thought was the best thing to do, is to find ways to feed not only his mom and his sister, but also himself, of course. Anyway, it made her sad and depressed, and started to think about how can we get out of this rut of, always this negative spiral that we as a community are in, and came up with some ideas, and started to play around with those ideas, and decided that she was going to start a bursary, and in which she would donate some money to well-deserving kids in school if they completed their schooling. They went from elementary school to middle school to high school in those days. And eventually she kind of rounded out her ideas and concepts and came up with the idea that, and she used it as a marketing piece, but nevertheless, she did something that really inspired her by saying, hey, if you complete high school, I will pay for your college education or your university education. And she had found some sponsors. She found, and she said, from her own sales, she would contribute X amount of dollars into this trust fund that would then pay for these educational programs. And so, in a period of about 5 or 6 years, she had converted this from a really small little program to a full blown scholarship program for kids in her community. And in doing so, she's motivated so many children to finish their high school, and some of them, and a good number of them went on to complete their college education and got it paid for, right? So that the spirit, the mood, the whole vibe, the whole mentality, the mindset in that community shifted from something negative to something very positive. Right? It started to show up in day-to-day attitude to each other, and people were more respectful and kinder to each other. People started to look after things a little bit more, got more interested in involved in school and after-school activity, and so on and so forth. And overall, the whole community started to just look up and be much more engaged and positive, and all of that in a relatively short period of time. And of course, she, received some notoriety and some rewards and recognition for it, and her business started to thrive, which gave her an opportunity to donate more money and make her scholarship even bigger and bigger. So eventually, other people started to donate to her program as well. So now she has a fully funded scholarship program that anybody in the school district where she lives and operates that wants to complete a university degree, it, and makes application, is awarded the scholarship to complete local universities. That's and it's unbelievable, right? I mean, so when she was telling this story very emotionally and very passionately, I mean, it was literally not a dry eye in the room. Even today, I'm still, because I'm visualizing all of this, and I'm remembering being part of it. And even today, it's an emotional story to me. And I think it's remarkable. It's just exactly right, the kind of big why that people are proud of, that you can connect with, that you can relate to. And for her, it became the cornerstone for all of her life, not because of the money that it generated for her cash flow, but for her bigger purpose in her life. And she was able to attach so many significant events in her life to it that it was very formative, and it gave her, of course, lots of opportunity for business, but also for building relationships with people of all kinds. I mean, she meant governors and senators and presidents and so on and so forth. It really shaped her life, right? And in doing so, it went way beyond her own kind of original beliefs and big why. But, if you dream and you put pieces in place, all of a sudden things may grow well beyond what you thought. So that story alone was not the end of the story in this particular case, because smart enough as she was and a good salesperson, of course, while she has this compelling attention of all of these active realtors, he said, and oh, by the way, if you feel compelled to make a donation to our scholarship, I'm glad to take your donations, off the side here at the stage, and that really would appreciate it, and I'll sign my book and yada yada yada. Anyway, she collected well over $20,000 in this one presentation, right? So, and that again went back to her scholarship program. So you see, when you figure out your big why, um, and you put pieces in place to allow you to work congruently in sync with your big why, it's no longer work, is it? it becomes uh, a passion adventure. I can tell you three or four other stories in similar fashion in which people just found their compelling reason why they wanted to be part of this business. Now, could she have done exactly the same thing in another industry? Oh, absolutely. No question. Right? This is not exclusive to real estate, of course not. But she found her niche, her pocket, her sweet spot. And when we talk about the big why and superpower, they're oftentimes somewhat intermingled, right? Why? Because your big why is typically a really big long-term passion, or dream, or objective, where your superpower is something that you probably are already involved in. Right? It's something that you probably would spend time, money, energy, effort onto, even if real estate wasn't your business or it wasn't your career, a hobby, an interest, a sport, I don't know, reading books, playing games, making puzzles, walking dogs. Anything can be your superpower that makes you memorable enough so that people go like, "Oh wow, here's I remember the lady with the red head. I don't know why that came to mind, but uh, because she wore a red hat every day, she just loved red hats, not heads, hats. um, and there's people that tell stories about their dogs, or that go walking little streets because they love historical buildings, so they walk the streets where these historical buildings are, and then tell stories about these buildings, and so on and so forth. So whatever you're passionate about can also become kind of your superpower, and that can have an impact, can have a origin in your big why. But today we're specifically talking about this really lifelong objective of your big why, as to how and where you fit that into your motivator, to do things that you may otherwise, you know, find reasons not to. Right? Um, Lead generation isn't always fun, but if you have a really good big why, big reason why you want to be successful, maybe you'll do it. Right? So here's some three really defining questions that can kind of help you uh, to establish what your big why might be. So, what do I want real estate to give me? Think about that for a second. So, what do you want real estate to give you? Right? What is it? Is it strictly money? And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not suggesting for a moment that there's anything wrong with having a big why that is financially motivated. But what else? Is there anything else? And if so, can you describe it? Can you write it down? And what does success mean beyond money? Sometimes it's influence, control, time, freedom, independence. But there's a story in our workbook that talks about a realtor that defined his big why: the ability to spend time with his kids whenever the kids wanted it or needed it. That's a pretty big why when you think about it, right? Because most of us have, if you are somewhat connected to traditional careers, they have a clock, right? You're supposed to be in a certain place at a certain time at a certain day. 9 to 5 jobs, or whatever schedule or jobs that you may have, preventing you from sometimes doing things like that, as in, showing up whenever the kids may want or need to, which is, I guess, also one of the reasons why some people actually pick real estate, because by default, you don't set the clock, right? It's actually one of the key reasons why some people are in real estate, is that not being tied to a desk feeling, right? The third question is, who do I want to impact? Right? Who do you want to impact? And what is that impact? How do you want to influence people? How do you how do you contribute to their well-being, their life? And I mean that in the most positive and constructive and encouraging way. Obviously, you could take this in the dark side, and that's not where we're going with this at all. So please, let's not just make assumptions in that direction. But you get the point. Is that what do you want real estate to give you? What does success mean in real estate beyond money? What does that mean? What does that look like? What is that? How do you describe that, right? And who do I want to impact? So spend some time on that. And again, these questions are repeated in the workbook. So and be sure to make some time to go through the workbook and complete the exercise and questions, particularly on the superpower and this section, the big why. Because they're very formative. They really are important for you to kind of come to grips with, the motivators, the driving force behind all of this. Okay, so this next part can be a little bit abstract for some people. Because it's not all that easy to look at your big why, your big goals, and your big purpose in life, and then turn that into something that is deemed to be a business model. Right? I told you the story about the lady working towards scholarships. So she was able to find a connection between her drive to fund scholarships and her day-to-day business activities. She found a way to incorporate that. She made sure that part of her commissions would go towards these scholarships. She would promote the fact that she was giving scholarships to people that bought with her and so on and so forth. That became part of her being, her marketing, her lead generation, but also what she stood for within the community. So that was her bridge, her niche, her differentiator, so to speak. So what's yours? Right? What will you bring to the table that connects your big why, your superpower to your business? And it's remarkable that the people that can articulate this, the people that can actually describe this part, find that they're actually not feeling real estate as work. It's become part of their passion. They, for them, lead generation is not about lead generation. It is just meeting people that they haven't met before in order to help them wherever it is that they want to go, and in the process, allowing you to accomplish what you want to accomplish. Right? It's much more relationship based. It's much more non-threatening. It doesn't feel like um, action steps. It feels more like, hey, we're going to add value to the life and the well-being of other people. Okay. the the other piece there is that figuring out if let me explain it this way. Say, for example, your life goal is freedom, right? Now, financial freedom, freedom from obligation, commitments. Now, what does that look like? Okay, if that means that you need to build a business system, business model that allows you to take days, weeks, months off at the time, but business still continues, right? That's a business. Otherwise, you have a job. If the moment that you don't show up, right, your business suffers, you don't own a business, you own a job. And there's nothing wrong with one or the other, but let's not call it a business then, call it a job. And sometimes we get kind of in this hybrid mode, calling something self-employed. Well, by definition, if it's self-employed, i.e. you need to do the work, self-employed, right? Um, it's not a business. And that's okay. Most of us in real estate are to some degree self-employed. there's very few that actually run a business in real estate, where 90 to 95% of the work is performed by others. And you have a managerial position that, supervises the systems being implemented and performed at a very high level, right? That's that's a that's a difference. So, but if your life goals can be articulated in some way, shape, or form, and say, in order to fund my life goals, I need to earn X amount of dollars. Now you can build activities, tasks, roles, responsibilities, systems, operating procedures, action steps, delegation jobs, and job descriptions, and so on and so forth, in order to accomplish those financial objectives that will then pay for your life goals. Right? You see the progression and the transition from this somewhat abstract set of dreams, goals, objectives. They're not easy necessarily to convert into past jobs and activities. But once you have done that and said, okay, this is how I will get there, right? Then you can reverse engineer it very easily into, okay, if I talk to 20 people a day and I do it 20, 30, 40, 50 times a year, okay, then this amount of business will come from that. And there are reasonably predictable averages and statistics for that. Okay. So again, if your big why equates to freedom, financial or other freedoms, then build systems to allow that to happen. Right? And then you hold the systems accountable to use the implementation, the effectiveness, the efficiency of those systems. Right? All I have to say is one name, and you'll know what I'm talking about. It's McDonald's, right? McDonald's is basically, and I mean, somebody described it that, somebody said, well, McDonald's is a fast food restaurant. And even Ray Kroc says it, who created the franchise model around McDonald's. He very easily and very distinctly said, no, it's not even a restaurant. We're not actually in the food business, right? McDonald's is a real estate company thinly disguised as a food services business. But their main source of revenue is the real estate. Everything else is kind of, where the cash flow comes to pay for the real estate. Okay. But if you actually look in the day-to-day operations of a McDonald's, right, everything is a system, from the creation of, how to build a hamburger, the cooking, how to deal with the milkshakes, how to deal with the people flow, how to deal with the packing, the garbage, the cleanup. Everything is a system, and everything is documented to paper. So if you go through the McDonald's system, and if you've been fortunate enough to have worked there at some point in time in your life, you will recognize that the entire operation is run by teenagers for the most part. Run, not managed, not owned, but run by teenagers. Now, I'm a parent, and I've had teenagers, and I'm sure that lots of you have had teenagers. Not always the most disciplined people, shall we say. Now, there's very disciplined, very well organized teenagers, but if I look back at my own teenagers yet, I'm not so sure whether I would have been the ideal candidate for a job at McDonald's. I was literally all over the place with my mind and with my activities. But McDonald's makes that work. So that goes to the credit of their ability to use systems and give somebody a job and say, okay, do these things, do them well, and here's how you do it, here's other steps, and do you know what, do you understand the yada, 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 and keep training on the systems, and then holding those systems and their implementation accountable, right? It's, and when we talk about converting big whys into business models, that's really what we're talking about, is being able to really articulate all of these roles and activities and tasks into day-to-day activities. Right? Okay. So if your big why, for example, is family security, well, what's the budget? And what is your resilience? Right? What is your ability to handle rejection and the challenges that come along for the ride? So important pieces to kind of consider, when you go from big why to what does that look like in day-to-day business activity? Right? So here's an exercise, and it's kind of a big exercise, and it's an important exercise. And you can use a workbook, or you can just use a blank sheet of paper and use it on a day-to-day basis. Write down a goal, any goal. Doesn't matter what it is. The real question is why do you want that? If it's money, and okay, pick a number, any number, whatever the number is, then say why. Why is that important to you? What are you going to do with that? How is that going to, dramatically change life? What do you fill in to as the use or the purpose or the reason for that money? Or it's a car or something altruistic. Uh, you may have heard a story that I told about a realtor and her daughters who decided that they were going to build 2 schools in Peru. That's a big why. But why did they want that? Well, they were very spiritual and very kind-hearted people. They had traveled to Peru on holidays and had seen the suffering and the inavailability of education for many people in the country at the time when they did that. So they made it their life's purpose, right, to build 2 schools. And then once they had built them, they decided that they were going to live there and maintain them, operate them, not as teachers, but more as kind of overseers, managers for you know the community that was inevitably built around these schools, right? Because the kids and their parents and you know their siblings and so on and so forth, it becomes a community as a whole, right? So what is your why on everything that you can write down as a goal? Why are you doing that? What's driving you? Okay. Now do this at least 5 times, at least. And from these motivations, the reasons why, from all of these goals, whatever it is that you write down, you will find something starts to show up. That there's a root motivator that will show up at some point in time. You may already know, but if you don't, then this will help you articulate that and define it. All right, do that exercise. It's a really important. It will make everything else that you need to do in business that much easier later on. And I can honestly say this you can do today, and change your life for the rest of your life. And it doesn't matter where you're at and what you do. If you never do anything in real estate, this can still change your life in any way, shape, or form. Okay. Now, so use our workbook. Um, it's a good workbook. It's got a whole bunch of other questions in there, and I'll do a separate video with specifically going some of the exercises in the workbook. But if you can put your hands on on a copy of the book called "Start with Why" by Simon Sinek, really good book about more definition and more articulation around why a big why is so important and how it can help you really find purpose and drive and motivation and core values and missions for building a real roadmap for your life. And it's, somebody said many, many years ago, if you don't know where you're going, any road will do. Well, yeah, that's true. And for some people, that's exciting. And that may actually be, one of the ways that they go through life. There's so many younger kids, that come out of high school or come out of university and decide to go and travel for a year or whatever and find themselves. But even they have some form of a roadmap, right? Even they say, well, I'm going to go here, and then from there and then yes, it may become somewhat loose ended, but there's always, a plan to come home, right? 99.9% of the time, there's a plan to come home. So that still is part of the roadmap. And I really encourage you to kind of think of your big why as a, a destination that may be even beyond your reach, but the journey itself then becomes part of that destination, if that makes some sort of sense, right? That the activities that you perform along the way serve that bigger why, that bigger goal, that bigger purpose. Okay. Now, if you can, make some recordings, one, two, three, right? And about your big why and the reasons why, right? And use that as a kind of a affirmations, if you want to call it that, if you want to use it as reminders. You know, it will also, if you really think about all of these things in a kind of a business sense, it may give you some ideas as to how you're going to shape yourself, how what your business model is going to look like, right? What you stand for, how you want people to remember you, how you want them to recognize you, what they want them to remember you for. It may also, and this is maybe one of the key pieces that you need to put in the back of your mind a little bit, is that once you become licensed, if that's where you're heading towards, there is a lot of stuff that's being thrown at you the moment that you are licensed, because all of a sudden, there's doors open that you hadn't even thought of, right? There's a lot of information, a lot of education, a lot of technology, a lot of hands-on expertise that you all of a sudden need to deal with. So one of the challenges with that is that it's just way too much. It's going to feel, act, and experience like you're drinking from a fire hose. It's coming at you so intensely that it becomes hard to figure out what is important and what's not. Now, your big why can be one of the best ways to filter all of that. Because if you know where you're going, right, then the key questions, three questions, will become, a real good way to focus all of that and to really hone in on how you're going to apply this, which is, what do I need to do? What do I need to have? And what do I need to know in order to be on point, on purpose, on focus of my big why? Right? So if part of your big why says, hey, I need to be involved with community groups in my community, then you doing, I don't know, for sale by owners, well, you can skip that lesson, right? Because that's not what you're going to be doing. Right? You're going to be more involved with networking and so on and so forth. So it can really kind of focus you in on the areas where you do need to spend some time, right? And it can be really a catalyst for propelling you through all of this huge, massive information that's going to fly at you and say, hang on, time out. Don't need this, don't need that. This is not in the right timing or later, and but we'll get to it, and it can save you a lot of time, a lot of headaches, and a lot of grief. So I would certainly encourage you to utilize your big why in that form as well, right? Is what I'm learning today serving my big why? And if it's not, then maybe another time, right? Again, you are your own boss, right? You are the owner of this business. So you get to set the controls. And sometimes you're going to get some pushback from managers or coaches or organizations, but you still got to think about Okay, is this serving my big why? Okay, here's a bit of a script prompt in helping you kind of create an affirmation around a big why, a motivator, right? The reason I'm pursuing real estate is because, and then fill in your big why, it motivates me to push through challenges because it serves this, or I want to accomplish this, or you know. So little motivators, little affirmations like that can really help people remind themselves why they're doing certain things, so that they can stay on track. They can stay following their roadmap and stay following their purpose. I hope this session was helpful for you. Your big why is absolutely fuel, right? Um, I get excited about talking about this subject mainly because I see the light go on with a lot of people when they figure out that, hey, this is not just about the money, although the money's good, right? But once you know how to make money, you can always make more money. That's kind of functionary to some degree, right? When you change people's lives, right? When you add value to their lives, or you give them an opportunity that they didn't have before, whether that is directly related to your activities in real estate or outside of it, that's a pretty cool experience to go through, and then it can be a huge motivator. And that may be one of the reasons, or one of your big whys. Again, I don't want to lead you in trying to figure out what your big why ought to be. That's up to you to do. Right? It doesn't have to be about people. It doesn't have to be about anything, but whatever it is that you want it to be. So, is there a particular way that you can best do this? I would basically say, go sit in front of that piece of paper and start writing things down. What is it really important to you? And if you get a smile on your face, if it puts a sparkle in your eye, if it puts an extra step, a jump in your step, then you're getting close, right? And it's not a once in a lifetime type of situation. There's lots of people that have shifted and moved and nuanced their big whys over time. And it's almost inevitable because you don't know what you don't know, right? And until you start experiencing some of the things, all of a sudden you realize that, hey, I thought I was going over here, but no, I'm actually over there. Oh, okay. But if it serves your core values in the right way, in the right passion, then it's all good. All right. So please join me on the other episode where we talk about the workbook around the big why, and then the other sections of the 7 essentials to success in real estate, where we're going to talk about the superpower, the by the numbers, because numbers are pretty critical, the operating procedures, the automatic lead generation, the transaction machines, and adding wow to everything that you do, because that's the cool part. All right. Hope to talk to you soon and see you on the other side. Have a fantastic week.
File saved. The Agent Files. For more missions, agents' tools, and tactical strategies, subscribe and follow the Agent Files, powered by Agent Builder Coaching. Until next time, stay sharp. Your next mission awaits.